Good afternoon and welcome to the March 21st edition of the Gold Goats and Guns Short News. It's my short live streams, and we've got a lot to talk about today. My name is Tom Luongo, and boy, I want to talk about Brexit. Been all over Brexit in this channel for a while now. It's incredibly important, and today I want to really go over the reason why it's so important. As we get closer to March 29th, as things begin to settle out, and we really begin to watch how much the pressure is getting to everyone, it's becoming really obvious to me who does and who does not have the stones to stand up to the historical significance of this event. Before we go do that, let's do a little housekeeping here. Remember, live streams happen on Monday nights at 8, Friday nights at 8:30. They tend to be a little NSFW, so if you don't like harsh language, headphones. You can also follow my work at tomluongo.me, as well as on Twitter at TFL1728. I also write regularly and weekly for moneyandmarkets.com, as well as strategicculture.org. Let's get right to it. So, Brexit, what's the latest? Well, the latest is French President Emmanuel Macron came out today and said, if we will be willing to give you an extension as long as you vote for the deal. Echoing what Donald Tusk said yesterday. But if there's no vote for our deal, then there will be no deal. So we finally have a major European political figure say no deal is a possibility. Now, do I think he's bluffing? It's Macron. He's a poodle. Yes, I think he's bluffing. But what we're seeing is that Brexit is reaching its crisis point. Today, I want to talk about the historical significance of what this all means in the great context, because what you're seeing here is everybody beginning to realize just how important this is. And the games, the brinksmanship that everybody's playing to get there, to find their way through this such that they can leave their reputation intact, is putting enough pressure on everyone that the odds of a no deal rise, because everybody's competing agendas, be it within the EU or within the UK, are such that there's no possible solution. There's no overlap of all of these agendas in the kind of grand political Venn diagram, right? And the reason for that is because the EU project is failing. At the end of the day, lurking behind the scenes is a sovereign debt crisis that is monumental. The EU wants the trifecta against the Brits. They want to not only keep them from leaving the EU, but strip them of their voting rights and leave them as a cash cow, along with serving as a warning to everybody else in the EU who's starting to get uppity. This is what your future looks like if you don't take the whip. Now, with that said, is that actually working? When it was Greece in 2015 and their debt talks with a minority government led by a feckless Greek leftist, it was easy. Germany had all the power in the world. They held all the cards. But the United Kingdom is not Greece. It's not 11 million people. It's 66 million. It's not an economy smaller than the size of half the states in the United States. It's the UK. Highly sophisticated economy. Granted, mostly now a services economy, legal services, financial services, and whatnot, but still a very large and dynamic economy and a very sophisticated division of labor nonetheless. So there's no way that they could run the same playbook, the EU that is, against the Brits and not eventually run up against the very problem that caused the Brexit vote to be successful in the first place, which is that the people of Britain can see, enough of the people of Britain can see what's happening on the continent and be horrified by it. These are very proud people. Like the Brits or hate them, very proud people. They gave us the Magna Carta. They have the oldest parliament in the world. They're very proud of that heritage, as bloody and as violent and as checkered as it is. They'll be the first ones to admit to that. Well, my honest opinion, the last 70 years of Britain have not been all that interesting. They came out of World War II, full-blown Marxists, nearly destroyed hundreds of years of inherited capital and 70 years of, or 40 years of ridiculous Marxism that they exported to most of the rest of Europe. Who then, bear with me here, who then, in that same post-war period, being subsidized by two very important factors. The United States through the Marshall Plan and their own oil and gas revenue. The discovery of the North Slope for the United Kingdom, the discovery of the big gas fields in the north, off the coast of Denmark, right? Scandinavia, Norway. All these countries have been able to subsidize their drive to Marxism, social democracy, Marxism. All this stuff is subsidized in the same way that the USSR was subsidized by their vast oil reserves. Their vast oil production for years. Oil was so important, so valuable, and so profitable that it created a false boom of expectations and a false boom of promises. I'm not the only one talking about this. Martin Armstrong's been talking about this for years. This is, when you analyze things from this perspective, this is what you get. And so American Marxists here, American socialists here, look at Europe and they look at the UK and they look at Europe and they see that as a model. People like Bernie Sanders and even Tulsi Gabbard, who I appreciate for her foreign policy and her understanding of the big game of geopolitics, don't make the connection of the unsustainability of those models. And the EU itself is that Europeans flavored socialism exported by the Brits writ large. Exported by the Brits, mutated by the French writ large. Really, and at the end of the day, that's the philosophical underpinning. That's what they sell to people. The truth of the matter is, it's just raw, naked aggression. It's just raw, naked thievery. It's just raw, naked power politics. It's just typical thievery by an oligopoly and an oligarchy. So that's all it is. But we subsidize them, and Trump, to his credit, to his eternal credit, this is where I'll be happy to sing Donald Trump's praises, has laid that bare, laid the dichotomy of our paying for their defense while they buy gas from Russia. He's simplifying it. He's leaving aside all the benefits we get. But that basic dichotomy is very real. And the discontent that exists at a popular level all across Europe is an expression of people just saying, look, I've had enough of this. We've done this for too long. We're broke. We have nothing left. Be it the Gilets jaunes in France, Brexit, Lega, Fidesz, Law and Justice, Austrian People's Party. Doesn't matter who we're talking about. It's all the same thing. Alternative for Germany. All the same thing. And so Brexit is not just another moment in history. Brexit is the pivotal moment of the 21st century. Brexit is that moment which represents an existential threat to a century of European socialism. And American socialists are feeling it. That's why this has been, we are so thoroughly divided. This is an ideological divide. This is an ideology fighting for its life. Because if the Brits leave on a no deal and thrive, the whole argument for the European Union collapses quickly. No deal ends the illusion of their inevitability. It ends the illusion of Marx's predictions. It ends all of that. They run out of excuses. All of it. Marxism was dealt a body blow with the fall of the USSR and the fall of the Iron Curtain and the Berlin Wall in the 90s. But it's morphed. But the out was always, it wasn't a very good implementation. It was communism. We've got democratic socialism. It's better. What we have in Europe. And they're trying to replace democratic socialism with a technocratic oligarchy. First, it was the USSR. Now we have the EUSSR. It's the way it's run. It's actually even more monstrous than the USSR was. Minus all the purges under Stalin, of course. Juncker may be a drunk and a totalitarian, but, he hasn't murdered 50 million people. Give him time. So, understand that the dynamic here is very important. And as all of the factions try to figure out their way of getting out of this unscathed, because the EU can't negotiate. They've made it abundantly clear they cannot negotiate with the Brits. If they negotiate at all, if they give the Brits a unilateral way out of the Irish backstop, it gives them a unilateral way to abrogate the entire treaty that they just signed when the next government comes in, and that's that. And they have secured nothing. And then the rest of their malcontents will be emboldened. But it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Because if you stop Brexit, you'll be looked on as totalitarian bullies. You'll win the short term. You'll win the short-term confidence of the markets. But in the end, you will lose everything because you will have been revealed for who you actually truly are. It's the same problem happening here with the deep state in the United States as they go after Donald Trump over literal nothing. The fact that Donald Trump is such a threat to the deep state here in the United States should tell you just how weak they are. That they responded the way they have. Well, it's the same thing with the EU. They wouldn't be fighting Brexit this hard. They wouldn't be activating sleeper cells within the British government fighting it this hard if they weren't fundamentally weak, if they weren't fundamentally facing an existential threat. And that's why No Deal Brexit is so important. Doesn't matter whether you voted leave or remain. Doesn't matter if you're an American, a Brit, a German, an Italian, or anything else. If you believe that the individual has any right to determine the course of their own future, you have to reject what the EU has become. And you have to reject the EU itself. It is a foundation of sand. And the people are holding a fire hose. That's what we're facing here. If No Deal Brexit goes down, it will be the turning point of the 21st century. Mark my words. We will look back on this moment in time, and we will look back at the people who made it happen, and they will be lionized or vilified, depending on who writes the history books. But they will be the pivotal figures of history. We're living it right here, right now. This is not a drill. So, It's important to understand the historical context of this. It's important from both history past and history future. Because if the EU fails to stop Brexit, they won't be able to stop Italy. They won't be able to stop Portugal. They won't be able to. They won't even be able to stop Grexit at that point, because not Grexit, but Gerexit, because the Germans are going to rise up at some point and say enough is enough. We don't want to bankrupt ourselves for Mrs. Merkel's project. If Britain thrives after a no deal Brexit, that's the fear. And the likelihood of that happening is very high. It's all an elaborate bluff. Every bit of it. So what happens next? What are we going to see over the next week? More of the same. From what I understand, I was watching Nigel Farage, listening to his radio show earlier, and there was supposed to be a press conference. Hasn't happened yet. But after the EU 27 leaders got together, that was supposed to happen over 2 hours ago. It hasn't happened yet. They're still arguing about what to do, how to. It took them hours to figure out how they could approach what's their next game plan. They don't have a plan Z. They never thought they'd get the plan H, no less plan Y. And that's where we are. And Parliament is most likely going to deliver a no deal Brexit next week. That's my prediction. Because too many of them need the job. At the end of the day, bet on the enlightened self-interest of individual politicians, and that includes Theresa May. Does Theresa May really want to go down as the woman who destroyed the Tories and who destroyed British democracy? Does she really want to have that as her legacy? How much could the EU possibly have offered? How much could people like George Soros possibly have offered her for that at the end of her life? She's closer to the end of her life than the beginning. She's no spring chicken. She'll be the most vilified person in British history if she betrays Brexit. I'm with Nigel Farage on this one. I don't think she does that. I don't think most of the members of Parliament do it either. And that's why no deal today, in my mind, is a 75-25 bet. Because John Bercow made a classic miscalculation on Monday by ruling out her being able to bring back the deal for a third time. That was supposed to scare people, and it didn't work. The EU is losing this fight, but they refuse to admit it. They're good poker players. Something will happen between now and the 29th, and it may not be good. It may wind up being some last minute skullduggery. But do you think that the next British election, along with 73 Nigel Farages showing up in EU Parliament, is going to be good for the EU? It's not. And never forget one thing about this. Markets will tell the tale. Markets want this over and done with. The markets are positioning themselves now for a no-deal Brexit. The pound is falling versus the euro. It's not rising versus the euro anymore. The FTSE stock index is outperforming the German DAX. Bond yields have been pushed as far down as they could possibly go. The American bond markets are getting slammed in a safe haven trade. The positions are clear at this point. And the Fed capitulated yesterday completely because they need to tell the markets, don't worry, there will be enough dollars in case of a no-deal Brexit. No one has this under control. And when no one at this late stage, if no one has this under control, there's not a possible deal because they've hashed everything else out. And now it's just a matter of who's ever left is trying to figure out how they can survive. I'd go so far to say as I think with certainty, no deal is going to happen next week because of all of those things and because of all the signs that we've seen. But we'll see. We will see. All right, well, it's going to be fascinating. And we'll do this again tomorrow night at 8:30 on my live stream. And probably again over the weekend. So, the comments are telling me that we've got all sorts of Project Fear being amped up to 11. They're going plaid. Pick your metaphor. Dogs and cats living together. It's a big Twinkie. That's all I got to say. You guys have a great afternoon. It's been the Gold Goats and Guns Short News for Thursday, March 21st, 2019, a week before Brexit. Keep your stick on the ice.